Have you ever stood in front of a beautiful sunset, looked at the scene with your own eyes, and thought, "This is incredible," only to take the photograph and discover that the sky is completely white or the foreground has turned into a black silhouette? It can be frustrating because you know what you saw, yet your camera captured something completely different. The reason is something called dynamic range. And once you understand it, you'll stop blaming your camera and start learning how to work with light instead of against it. Dynamic range is simply the difference between the brightest and darkest parts of a scene that your camera can record while still keeping detail in both. Our eyes are remarkably good at adapting to changing light. If you walk from a bright sunny street into a dimly lit room, your vision adjusts within seconds. If you look at someone standing in front of a bright window, you can usually see both the person's face and the detail outside. Your brain is constantly processing light, making adjustments without you ever noticing. A camera, however, has no such ability. It captures a single exposure, and that exposure has limits. Imagine trying to fit an entire orchestra onto a tiny stage. Some musicians are going to end up with very little space. Photography works in much the same way. When a scene contains extreme contrast, your camera has to decide where to place all that information. If you expose for the bright sky, the shadows may become completely black. If you expose for the shadows, the sky may become completely white. Neither exposure is technically wrong. The camera is simply working within the limits of its sensor. This is why photographers become obsessed with light rather than cameras. They know that the quality of light often matters more than the quality of the equipment. Soft morning light, late afternoon sunlight, and overcast conditions naturally reduce contrast, making it easier for the camera to capture detail throughout the scene. Harsh midday sunlight, on the other hand, creates deep shadows and brilliant highlights, pushing even expensive cameras close to their limits. Modern cameras have improved dramatically over the last decade. Larger sensors and newer technology allow photographers to recover more detail from shadows and highlights than ever before, especially when shooting in RAW. But even the most expensive professional camera still has a limit. That's why photographers don't simply buy better cameras. They learn techniques to overcome those limitations. One of the simplest techniques is changing your position. If your subject is standing in direct sunlight with a bright sky behind them, take a few steps so the sun is no longer directly behind them. Suddenly, the contrast becomes much easier to manage. Another solution is to add light. A reflector or a flash can brighten the shadows, reducing the difference between the brightest and darkest parts of the scene. Landscape photographers often wait patiently for the light to improve instead of trying to force a photograph in impossible conditions. Sometimes the best camera setting is simply patience. There are also situations where high contrast actually adds emotion to an image. Think about a dramatic black and white portrait with deep shadows or a silhouette against a colorful sunset. Those photographs work because the photographer made a creative decision to embrace contrast rather than fight it. Understanding dynamic range doesn't mean trying to eliminate every shadow. It means knowing when detail matters and when drama matters more. Here's a simple exercise you can try. Photograph a person standing in front of a bright window. First, expose for the person's face, then expose for the window. Finally, if your camera allows it, shoot the same scene in RAW and see how much detail you can recover during editing. You'll quickly discover both the strengths and the limitations of your camera, and you'll begin understanding why professionals pay so much attention to light before they ever think about camera settings. The next time you find yourself looking at an incredible scene, don't immediately ask whether your camera is good enough. Instead, ask yourself where the brightest light is coming from, where the darkest shadows are, and whether the contrast is helping or hurting the story you're trying to tell. That's the way experienced photographers think, and it's one of the biggest steps you can take towards creating consistently better photographs. In our next lesson, we'll move away from camera settings and explore one of the most important creative principles in photography: composition. You'll discover why some images immediately grab your attention while others are forgotten within seconds, even when they're taken with the same camera.